Okay. Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, September 19th. I'm Aaron Krickenberger. This is the weekly SIG testing meeting. On the agenda today, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple shiny new things. I wanted to have a brief discussion about test infra and on-call stuff that sort of got raised during SIG release today. Srini wants to talk a little bit about documenting conformance tests, and then I believe Eric Feda has a bunch of shiny ongoing work that he wants to update us on. If I've left anything out or if we have time at the end, please feel free to add to the agenda, which I will paste in the chat here in just a minute. So, shiny things. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see the agenda I'm looking at. The first thing, SIG Apps has put together an integration test plan for how they want to test a bunch of workload controllers. So things like, replica sets, stateful sets, daemon sets, deployments, and cron jobs, or corn jobs, I guess. So conceptually, they came up with the idea of putting together a real control plane, but a bunch of hollow nodes. And then the issue has been kind of sitting around for a couple weeks now, awaiting input from SIG testing. So I asked in the SIG testing Slack channel like last week or 2 weeks ago, and didn't see much traction there. And so they're sort of noticing that by virtue of lazy consensus, maybe we're totally cool with this. But I did try and remind people that we did have a big discussion about what integration testing really is, the idea of whether or not it made sense to do integration testing against sort of a lower fidelity cluster. In the past, we were talking about doing this with a Docker and Docker cluster. In this particular pull request, it's talking about a real cluster, but fake hollow nodes, sort of the same way kubemark works. And just whether or not we have any opinion on it. I mean, at this point, it seems like we haven't weighed in, so I'm not inclined to prevent somebody from doing work they are eager to do to make testing more reliable and more productive for them. And it could be that this provides data, that this is a more reliable approach. But I just wanted to call attention to this, that if anybody has any strong opinions, please do weigh in on this issue. Next up, Prow's been having a lot of work done to it recently. The documentation for it is improving quite a bit. So we now have an announcement section. Most of you probably already know this, right? Where we're actually calling out breaking changes that we make to Prow as we do that. So things that if you're running your own instance of Prow, you'll want to watch out for or change. We also have sort of this architecture doc, which started out as the life of a Prow job. But we also have a getting started doc now, if I can find it, that actually teaches you how to spin up your own cluster, what all of the Prow components are, and how you might go about setting this up to be pointed at your own GitHub organization and your own repos, how you might want to add your own jobs and stuff. So there's been a lot of really cool stuff happening there. Finally, Cole put together, I'm just going to jump straight to the shiny part. He put together some metrics a little while ago to drive sort of this dashboard that shows us sort of flakiness and consistency, sort of redefining what those mean in potentially a more useful manner. So you can see sort of for a single commit, the probability that that commit's going to flake on a single job or potentially all of the jobs, all of the pre-submit jobs that run when you open up a pull request. And we've also now expanded sort of the flakiest jobs on the dashboard here from not just the job name, but also the flakiest test that is causing that to be the flakiest job. So when people ask about, like, is this the, here, leave that out. Is the, like, where can I help? What's the flakiest test where I can make the biggest impact by trying to dedicate some of my time to fixing flaky tests? We can show them this shiny graph. And we can show hopefully how over time those lines will go down if we're doing a better job of fixing these flakes. And we can use the flakiest job table here to point them at which flake for which job they should go take a look at. Let's see. So I think that's about all I have on the shiny portion here. So the next part, I have noticed, here I'll stop sharing, on call. So roughly the way I tried to phrase this during the SIG release meeting was that we're all actively paying a lot more attention to tests right now, and there are a lot more eyes on making sure that pull requests are tested and can get merged, and making sure that the submit queue and all of the test infrastructure is healthy. We're actively looking at test results a lot more for Signal, and it can be difficult to understand whether or not there is a problem and whether or not problems are being actively worked. So the example I gave during SIG release was I kind of noticed, yesterday, 2 days ago, that Jenkins was down. It didn't seem to be running any pre-submits. And I divined this by looking at, the history page of the submit queue and sort of the fact that the submit queue's the history page of the submit queue, and I was looking at the fact that Prow didn't really have any log links for any of the pre-submits. And then Eric sort of gradually discovered it was because the maintenance jobs weren't working, which I could have divined if I was looking at the SIG testing dashboard in test grid and looking at the last ran on time for the daily things. Dims, I think, brought up that he'll occasionally look at the last commit time for the last commit to master in Kubernetes. And so there's this whole thing where we as a community collectively are trying to figure out whether or not things are okay, because we've sort of lost that big red box that flashes up on the submit queue that says there is a problem. But the other thing was, okay, I could see based on chatter in the SIG testing Slack channel that we knew there was a problem and it was Jenkins and it was kind of sort of was being worked. And so I asked what the right thing to do in this situation was. So I opened up an issue in the test info repo, and then that issue just sort of sat there unassigned, untouched, no updates on how things were progressing, how Jenkins was healing, what we identified the problems to be. And so all of this information had to be gleaned by people pinging the channel throughout the day. And look, I know the work's going to get done when it gets done. Actively pinging people who are actively working on the problem just kind of slows us down and causes more context switches. So I'm trying to find the right compromise for making sure there's a little more visibility on when problems are being, when there is a problem and when and how the problem is being worked and when and how the community can be helpful here. So an example of the community being counterproductive is if we didn't know that Jenkins is down and we want to, paraphrasing Jeff here, live the life of a Kubernetes developer and just slash retest all day long, that's actually going to cause the Jenkins queue to build up and actually make the problem worse. But if we knew that there was a problem and that slash retesting was going to make the problem worse, we would have backed off as a community. So it's trying to find a way to bridge that gap. What Eric has done for now is sort of start up or extend the existing stand-up and turn it into more of a, if you are interested in this as a community member, there's an SIG testing test infra OnCall Standup, where we're just going to, I guess, maybe I want to hand off to you, Eric, to describe what's going on here. But my gist was, it's what are the things we can do to improve the stability of the submit queue and let people know that this is what's going to be worked on today to make life better. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think that part of the problem here is the existing test infra rotation, which is all internal to Google. There's sort of a high bandwidth communication channel that we're used to using amongst ourselves. And I think we need to figure out ways of getting that information out to the rest of the community. And so that part of, maybe, trying out movie, because we have a daily stand-up now. We could try having that in the, sort of a community version of that, at least for the short term until we get back into a healthier state. That's one thing to try. I think we just need to develop ways of communicate, strengthening the SIG testing communication channels and developing those. And having us be better practiced about using those channels. So I think one thing is there's sort of, there's this meeting, but that's only once a week. I think you have a good idea about having an issue that people can go to, or I I think we need to develop that practice. I think the problem is you opened that issue yesterday, but none of us really updated it. We kind of are just talking to ourselves, which is useful for us, but not useful for the community. We need to be posting some updates somewhere that the community knows how to find and that we are good about sending updates to. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, and eventually I think, I don't know if this is where we want to talk about extending the on-call rotation, but you know, I guess something that would be useful for us to know is like, what information do people want to see? And what ideas do people have about how we should be communicating that information to people?
Yeah, I mean, having clear, unambiguous signal that things are working or things are not working is difficult. I understand, and efforts are being made towards that. I mean, so one way of looking at it is it's not necessarily a new normal. It's a thing that's necessary when we are in release and the submit queue seems to be bumpy for whatever reason. This is why Chase was proposing, like, could we get just like, we have a daily burn down meeting that's focused all on the release. Could we have something that's focused just on making sure the test infrastructure is healthy and what's being worked on? And maybe that's the appropriate place to scope it. I think in the broader, the idea would be that the test infra on-call rotation can be expanded outside the walls of Google. And as we've talked about before, just like one of the purely technical limiting factors is the Google project in which most of test infra run stuff is a google.com owned project. And so if we could get that project owned outside of the walls of Google, we could then just like add, you know, spiffxp@gmail.com and people from Red Hat and Istio who are actively working on it. So I think that, I know I said it was a goal for 1.8 and then we all went off and did our own thing. I'd like to revisit whether or not we can do that for 1.9, especially since there are people who are actively working on and Kubernetes and the submit queue outside the walls of Google now. I mean, I think the community of people who given access to the logs for Prow and Munch GitHub could more actively triage and diagnose what's going on rather than having to throw up our hands and say, well, we don't know because that's something only test infra has visibility into.
Just as a comment too, I think it would be really good to frame the question, how do we assess the health of a Prow cluster, or like the Prow components on a Kubernetes cluster? Because I think as an operator of a cluster that sits outside of Google, I have the same questions. Can I very quickly look to see, you know, when was the last time I got a webhook from GitHub? You know, how many of my jobs are currently running? How many am I about to go do? Like, because of concurrency limits, how many things are currently pending? Like that sort of stuff that I think we should be exposing maybe through Prometheus, just from the components in Prow itself. I think that would be a really good place to start with what is currently happening.
Yeah, and another thing is that we could use Kubernetes supports airbag, so we could define some profiles. So we could use we could have specific privileges in clusters. So when I join, I want to see logs from Prow. I can only access logs from Prow and nothing else. So that could be another option.
So I was sort of thinking that there are, you know, two different things. One is improving our ability to understand and debug what is going on. And I think Steve is exactly right about, you know, the idea that we should have more metrics like when was the last time we merged something, or when's the last time we got a webhook, or how many pending jobs, you know, how many pending builds are there for each job, sort of metrics like that. Ryan and Quentin are working on adding some of those metrics. And so hopefully we'll have that first one. The first one we're starting with is like, how long has it been since we merged something? But yeah, there's definitely lots of others that we want to add. And I think the other question is, I think there always will be I think over time we always will run into things where things are going wrong, and how can we be better interacting with each other, and how can we be better communicating with each other, and how can we be better communicating with the community? Like, do people have, I mean, I can sort of make up random things, but if people have other opinions about things they want to see, I would be very interested in, you know, incorporating that feedback into what we start doing.
Do we have a sort of more general answer to that question? If I'm running an application, and let's say I'm publishing some metrics, or let's say, you know, we have some sort of like machine readable format on the health of the system, how do I don't know, publish a status page or something, like maybe something that SIG apps would, because these are Kubernetes applications, right? Like, do we have a solution for that question?
It's a good question.
No, but I think having a status page would be a great project.
Do you mean in general on Kubernetes?
Yeah, I mean, partially would be in general on Kubernetes. Is my thing healthy? That would be part of it.
So there is a SIG monitoring meetup that you can go to, and there is a sort of a roadmap type doc that you can look at. There are plans in that direction, but it's still pretty fluid. And I think a lot of the effort and a lot of the mind share is leading towards Prometheus at the moment.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that seems reasonable as well. Like, if we could even just have some semi bare bones status page that has automatic, you know, we have an alert, Prometheus says, oh, we haven't done X in 5 minutes. Let's put a little yellow triangle in there and everyone can see it. But that would be like one part of the messaging thing, I think.
Yeah. So I guess, like, maybe given the half hour we have and other people want to say stuff, I'm not sure this is the place to hash it all out, but like, I think if it's cool, if that daily on-call stand-up doesn't intrude on people's schedules too much, I would be curious to see how that works for the time being and see what we get. I personally believe that on-call, first and foremost, is a communications job. Only secondly is it actually like resolving the issue. So, you know, I, as a community member, if there's anything I can do to help broadcast information or clarify what's happening, you know, I'd be eager to do that. I guess I'm hearing that there's also an interest in allowing the broader community to participate in a technical manner, which we should look towards for 1.9. But maybe in the interim, this on-call stand-up will help us with the communications issues.
So I maybe have a quick suggestion. The reason we, I'm the current on-call, and I completely missed your issue opened against testing for repo about the Jenkins breakage yesterday. Because like I'm not assigned and I probably filtered my email, so that one slipped. It might be more helpful to like announce it in SIG testing, like pin it to the top announcement bar, like say current we have this breakage and this issue is tracking that. So everyone can just go to that place to see like if the test infra is generally healthy or it's have some issues and have a link with it.
Okay, we can give that a shot.
This might be something that's worth, discussing about later in the week. We've been having success with our breakout sessions thus far. Maybe this would be a good thing to have another breakout session for.
Yeah, I like the idea of developing some kind of like incident issue process that's a bit more highlighted.
Okay, I'll set something up and let's, see if we can get, I'll set that up and see how that goes. So then we can move on in our meeting.
Okay, Srini, have I left you enough time to talk about conformance testing?
Yeah, I don't need too much time here. Actually, Conformance work group wanted to document conformance tests. Right now, some 50 plus tests are marked conformance in the E2E test. And the idea is to write some kind of a documentation around these tests so that when we run the E2E test, we generate a document that contains what the test does and how it affects the conformance In order to do that, I got this information last week during the OSS Summit, and I thought about this for couple days, and I have a couple of ideas that I wanted to run by to see where this tool fits and what the tool does. There are two ways we can do it, basically like a Go-Doc kind of approach where, a test that is marked conformance, it's a tag on the test. At the top of the test, we write a comment saying this is a Go-Doc kind of comment, and we can scan through all the Ginkgo tests and see which are conformance tests and read this and publish it. I can share my screen and show you what that means. And the second approach is to inject a function call into the test itself that will take the test information as well as a comment that we can use to generate something like a similar document. Where this document goes, and those are the things we need to decide still, but essentially the two approaches I'm trying to talk about here. Let me quickly share the screen and I'll probably show you what I'm talking about. A simple scan test tool that can be an executable somewhere sitting, and when we run the CI, we run this tool at the end of it or at different points in time, which will generate a conformance. It's very rudimentary right now, but it will tell you what the test is run and the description. The description is basically something that we are picking up from the test itself, like a comment. Or we can do something like, if you see, I run a conformance test, and the test will call something like a docgen that will go and write it to a file, right? Which is much simpler. But there are goods and bads about these two approaches. If we use a tool to generate the documentation, we need to parse the files for Go-Doc kind of Go comments and see if they are associated with a test, and that is error prone. With the second approach, basically it is run all the time, and we generate the document. So, and I'm also not sure whether this fits into test infra set of tools that we can start using. I'm open for suggestions. Basically, this is the initial thought process I have. So, the plan is Brad Topol is also on the call, and he is basically working with the.
So yeah, I'm on the Kube Conformance work group that's led by Dan Cohn from the CNCF and William Dennis from Google, and there's a huge push for this type of stuff from the CNCF so that we can show that Kube is interoperable, and we have a lot of vendors that are running the conformance tests and passing it, and there's going to be a big splash in the future, probably at the next KubeCon. But one of the things we realized we needed was some documentation that says, hey, these are the conformance tests and here's what they do. And if you look at the current state where we're at, which is, well, if you want to know the conformance test, you go in and you grep for the conformance tag and you kind of have a sort of a vague description. We really do need to get to a little more formal model of the documentation of what it means to have conformance tests and why they're conformance tests. And, well, yeah, you could just go write that document, but everybody was pretty clear that that's just going to get stale very quickly and bit rot. And the thought was the safest thing to do, as we do a lot of things, is to engineer it into the code and be able to generate the document. So, the idea is Srini was looking at these approaches to hopefully find one that y'all didn't throw up over, that would give us the ability to quote unquote annotate the code like we used to do in the old days with Java doc. And then he's working on the tooling to go generate, what the conformance tests are. And then, simple folks like I can go in and actually go add those annotations to the conformance tests, and we'd actually be in a better shape of of being able to have a more formal reference for what it means to have conformance tests and why we have them. I'm sorry if that was a long-winded explanation.
Yeah, we already have a something that parses the test code and extracts the names from it. It's in test/list in the Kubernetes thing, and it's quite easy to grab the comments as well, just like Godoc does. That's how Godoc generates documentation files. It parses the code and it finds comments immediately preceding function declarations, and that way. It's either that or I find that anytime you copy strings, people are likely to forget to update them unless you have a specific rule ensuring that they match up. So you might have a better time if you extend some tool to automatically extract them, and you have a rule that every test tag conformance has a blurb that is also extracted by this tool about why it's a conformance test and what it does. But using the parsing package is quite easy. Just recommend you have a look into that before you go too far down this path. And it's also a little bit easier for people to use that since they're used to it already for Godoc.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping, that, you know, you guys being the experts here you'd click and you'd say, oh yeah, we've kind of done that, and here's how you could extend what we have, and folks, really don't go too far down a path. Please do this the way that we would recommend that fits really well with what we're already doing. That's exactly what we're looking for. Srini, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense perfectly. I can work with you and then extend the tool, the functionality we already have. If that is the case, then formalize.
I would definitely say that I personally like the idea of the Godoc, comment. Sounds a lot easier and faster than putting it inside of the test case, since some of our EDE tests can take 12 plus hours to run. So being able to just do that by analyzing the code is a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah, and this is already used to extract SIG annotations from each test to figure out, or actually that was one of the proposals. We ended up not going down that path all the way, but it's there, it works. Yeah.
Yeah, so Srini, I don't know if you've chatted much with Ryan yet, but I can connect you two up if you don't find each other after this meeting.
Sure.
That's awesome input. Thank you, and especially the performance implications. I don't think we fully realize that, so that's huge.
Yeah, it takes a embarrassingly long time to compile, even just to compile all of our unit tests.
Sure.
That's good. Thanks.
My understanding is that going forward, SIG architecture is going to be the SIG that owns the definition of what is a conformance and why it is a conformance thing. Have you run this idea past them?
Yeah, we've been, working hand in hand with them from the conformance work group over with them, that they quote unquote own it. But the devil in the details of and we just all met at the open source summit in LA. The devil in the details was guys, we want to see something, some pull requests that show these examples and start getting these annotated in the next couple of weeks. And so that kind of fell on my shoulders and Srini's shoulders to hopefully find a way to do this that was, acceptable and, well engineered into what you already had. And so, hopefully Srini can work with the folks and come up with a nice, simple syntax that, even dumb guys like me can then start generating the pull requests and going adding those annotations to all those tests.
For context, the test listing program takes about 2 seconds to parse all the tests. So
Nice.
It's nice and fast for any sort of lint rules or verified checks you can imagine.
That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah, really looking forward to that, because I think it's been a mystery to many why some of the things are conformance or aren't considered conformance. And that would be really cool to have alongside the tests.
Yep. Very cool. So yeah, as soon as we get sort of a format and a way to do it that you all and Srini agree to, folks like me, you'll start seeing those pull requests showing up. And you'll have to review them, right? Because, maybe I think it's a conformance test because of A, B, and C. And, you look at me and you'll shake your head and go, oh, geez, no, dude, it's D, E, and F. And that's cool, right? But that's how we learn.
All right, cool. We appear to be over time, but I'm certainly happy to stick around. Depends on how you feel, Eric, about giving some updates on what's been going on lately.
Yeah, maybe I was just, gonna give a brief. Let me see if I can find that doc. So I think, so yeah, sort of just, talk about similar things, right? Just sort of figuring out how to better communicate with the work that we are doing. So I think one thing that is being worked on is, so test grid alerts. I don't know, Michelle is here. Do you want me to give a blurb, or do you want to just give your little blurb what's going on with that?
Yeah, so I guess my quick blurb is, as usual, I underestimated the time needed to do that. I did get like an ad hoc, I've been working on some other internal stuff for test grid, sorry, as part of the delay. The other one is some setup that needed to happen before emails can go externally. I tested that ad hoc by spamming my own email account, and that seems to work. So I'm just doing the PR right now to change the configuration and allow people to email themselves. I'm going to set that up for me again first to make sure that I'm not like spamming too often, or there isn't a problem with the update server when I do that. But theoretically this week should be good, actually this time.
Can we alert on stale results?
We alert on stale, yes.
Okay.
So there's basically 3 fields. It's number of consecutive failures to alert on, number of stale hours to alert on if that's configured, and then who to send the emails to.
So that could have, helped with all these Jenkins things, because we could have noticed that, like, hey, it's been 4 days since our maintenance jobs have started. So that would be super cool. Yeah, there's been a bunch of Jenkins issues. We're trying to deprecate Jenkins. So Ben and maybe Jeff are looking into ways of seeing what, if any, jobs we can get off of Jenkins and onto Prow. We intend to sort of shut down Jenkins next release cycle. We'll see how that goes. There are still, so like, Ben is sort of looking into some of our builds, so like maybe having a way of doing the builds not inside of a Docker or a Docker and Docker. I don't know if he's here. I guess he could. I don't know. Yeah, so that's sort of that.
Hey, we are, but it's kind of, we ran out of time in the meeting room, so it's kind of bad sound in here.
Okay, yeah. Anything else you or Jeff want to add about that? Or is that
that's pretty much it. There is some work on it. It's not ready yet. Hopefully soonish, we'll see.
We're also doing some work of trying to split, like right now, every PR job does the same build over and over again. We're trying to work on sharing the builds, which is sort of related, although not explicitly. We could just continue doing the inefficient building, but we want to obviously get things off of Jenkins. Quentin and Ryan are working on, Quentin, do you want to talk about the monitoring stuff?
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So the plan for monitoring is we're just going to pipe metrics from Prometheus into Velodrom's, pipe metrics from Prow components into Velodrom's Prometheus stack, where we'll then go to an alert manager. It seems to be pretty vanilla stuff, and we'll send an email out to the current on-call and to the Slack channel. Specific things we want to monitor in the immediate future are webhooks coming into Prow and time since last merge. So those are the two. I feel the two biggest sort of like external facing things that define user experience. Does anyone have something else of that magnitude that they would like to see, or should we talk about secondary monitors?
No, I think that's a great start.
Yeah.
Did we make a decision as far as to push them or pull them?
So Prometheus, okay, so it's Prometheus is primarily a pull model, where the Prometheus goes out to a list of targets and pulls the metrics into itself. Sorry, is that what you were asking?
Right. I guess I had seen some conversation about using the push.
Yeah.
Push.
So Prometheus also provides a push gateway for primarily for 2 use cases. One for services behind a firewall that it's difficult or awkward to pull from, and 2 for ephemeral workloads. like for instance, batch workloads that have some things that are not persistent that won't necessarily be there when you go to try and reach them. And so the way that works in Prometheus is you push those to a push gateway, which Prometheus then goes and pulls. So a lot of this is done, but we haven't necessarily pushed it because we don't want to rock the boat at the moment with Prow. And I think a lot of it will be done in the near future.
Nice nautical pun there with Prow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
If you did push it up, I know we can potentially from a hat we might be able to put some man hours into that. I'm not sure what it looks like today, pushing it into the repo but not deploying it. I don't know if that's a problem or not.
So Quentin added push support for Prometheus, right? It's already in Prow. So you can use both the pull and the push model.
Sorry, can you say that again? I could not hear you.
Yeah, sorry. So you went ahead already and made Prow to be able to push Prometheus. So today we can use both models. So that's not a problem.
Yeah. Just go ahead and throw it in and send out a PR. If you want to talk about specific metrics you would love to see, just go ahead and ping me on Slack and or ping me and Ryan, and that would probably be the best way to do it without the lightest weight way to do it.
So Joe and Cole are both working on trying to migrate Munger's GitHub stuff over to Prow plugins and or cron jobs or other deployments. And anything you want to say about that, Cole?
Yeah, I'm going to work on moving the release note muncher over. I've recently just been working on making the plugins able to handle generic comment events instead of having to register for a bunch of different types of events anywhere where a comment can be left. So now Prow commands should work anywhere. So you can leave them in review comments and reviews. I think I'll probably have that done today.
Do we also have a tracking issue for this one? We had a new developer come on for us, and I was hoping to get him to do a migration. Just wanted to make sure we weren't.
No, I can create an issue for that though.
Okay, awesome. I meant tracking issue for like all the different munchers that we're about to move over.
There's like an issue that says we want to move them over, but it didn't spell out all of the munchers. So we could like turn that into a checklist of all the munchers that have yet to be moved over, or cross off the ones that can't be moved over because of X or Y.
I think that would be good for.
Right,
yeah, I can do that. I've already taken a look at that somewhat, so I can do that.
Okay, cool.
One big one that I know Kargakis expressed interest in at some point was the approvals handler. That one's kind of complicated because you have to like deal with all the owner's file processing. So is that still on your radar?
Yeah, it was.
Can you pronounce your first name, by the way? I've heard Steve say it a couple times.
It's Michalis, my common name, and my formal is Mikhail. But yeah, Michalis. So the approval stuff have fallen through the cracks the past weeks because I've been working on a couple of other stuff. But yeah, I've been meaning to start this again. Yeah, if it's if I don't get to it until next week, then somebody else should probably start on it. But yeah, I would really love to see it because the submit queue deployment was kind of a hassle because we are using the approval manager is with the submit queue manager today. We ran both. Yeah, and it has been a mess to handle.
Yeah, and then beyond that, Joe is also working on replacing the submit queue with Tide. And I believe right now he's working on the dashboard front end. I think he has it dealing with batches and it's not doing anything yet. I think he's done some experimentation on test infra, but it lacks a UI right now. And so he is going to work on creating that UI.
Cool. That all sounds like really exciting stuff. I'm super sorry for running long, but hopefully that was worth it for everybody else. I think with that, we'll call it Happy Tuesday, and I'll see some of you tomorrow and some of you next week.
Bye.
Later.